I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to those of you on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fantabulous co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
Yes, both together again in the good old studios here at 100.7 FM, and we're very happy to bring you For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, the wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your family, and the whales, and the krill that the whales eat, and the algae, the dinoflagellates that the krill eat, and basically everyone and everything, because, like it or not, all of us are wrapped up together on this wonderful planet called Earth. And we have another wonderful show lined up for you today. We're going to chat for another 10 minutes or so, and then we will hear an interview with Randi Pokladnik. She's back on the show. It's her second time, and she's going to be talking about some legislation in Ohio that would make it possible to force you to have carbon dioxide stored under your property, whether you want it there or not. Then we'll hear from our advertisers and patrons, our wonderful, wonderful advertisers and patrons. And then it's your turn at the mic, Rebecca. What will you be talking about today?
Red oaks.
Red oaks. Okay. And then it's ecological news. It's a mix this week. We got some really bad news, but we do have some really good news. So if you want to know what's going on the planet, stick around for our ecological news segment. And of course, hopefully at some point during this show, we will hear from you at 877-909-1007. That's 877-909-1007. We had somebody who tried to get on last week. We didn't, there were some...
We applaud your efforts.
Yes, and try again.
Yeah.
You know, persistence is extremely important in life.
Don't be discouraged.
Right, take a lesson here. So it's been a pretty good week for me. I actually went back over to Western New York, where most of my family lives, to stay with my mother for a week. She's 85, and my sister, who normally lives with her, wanted to go off on vacation, so I said I would stay at the house. And it was a very nice visit. You know, it was a really great time seeing family and stuff. But I'm kind of embarrassed to say that my mother is a global warming denier. You know, I know. Rebecca just looked shocked. Yeah.
That was shock.
That looked like shock.
It was shocked that an 85-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, she didn't used to be. That's the thing.
Okay.
She still is a very intelligent woman, but she used to actually apply that intelligence to scientific questions. But now she pretty much just parrots what happens on Fox News.
No.
And, you know, so because I stayed with her for the whole week, I got to see like her normal routine. And it was kind of interesting because she watches a lot of TV during the day, which many 80-somethings do. And her time was almost equally split between the Catholic channel, really heavy-duty Christianity, and Fox News, where the commentators on Fox News are like literally the least Christian group of people possible, because they all they do all day is like insult. They don't turn the other cheek. They're like, I'm not turning my cheek. You turn your cheek.
Exactly.
And so I realized, I kind of always wondered, how is it that she watches this Fox News, which is so nasty all the time? And she's not a nasty person. She never has been. And I think maybe the answer is because the other half of the time she's watching this, really Christian stuff with all high morals and everything. And I think her brain needs to balance the two out, because they're, if you put them together, you kind of get almost normalcy. But unfortunately, her and a lot of other people,
Like me with the YouTube serial killer videos and also the cute fuzzy animal videos.
exactly.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense. Total
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. Except Fox News, no, it still doesn't make sense. I would rather like relax by watching something about John Wayne Gacy, who's comparatively harmless compared to Fox News.
Well, I guess in terms of sheer numbers,
Yeah.
and actually that is something else I wanted to talk about, was that we are starting to see the numbers this past week with these huge storms that have hit the Midwest and the South and killed at least 27 people. And the thing is that we've told you this is going to happen. Those of us who've been talking about global warming have been talking about it for almost more than 30 years now, saying as the globe heats up, storms will have more energy and rain will fall harder and faster, and so you'll get more floods and more tornadoes, and and it's finally happening. And I was watching Fox News this whole past week, and as all the other news outlets that aren't like totally Foxified, they would report on things like the tornadoes, and Fox News would like mention them, but just completely ignore them and then go off on some other sort of change the focus. Even though we just literally had tens of billions of dollars of damage done from these global warming enhanced storms, you wouldn't know it to watch Fox News. You would think, oh, there was a storm over here and a storm over there. The Weather Channel does a great job of it, though. I mean, they were really right in there and showing some of these places that got terribly flooded. And the important thing to remember with global warming, of course, is that it is global. It's going to happen everywhere. Everywhere is going to get affected by this change in the climate, where things are going to get both drier and there'll be more flooding, and things will get hotter and there'll be more storms. And so this is something we talk about every show, is something that affects your wealth, your health, your happiness. Having your house destroyed by a tornado affects all those things. It's just not good for you. So when we see things like this,
It's true.
yeah,
It will negatively affect all three of those things.
yes, your wealth, your health, and happiness. Not one of the people that I saw whose houses got destroyed by these tornadoes were happy about it.
No,
oddly
no,
enough.
yeah.
They were all kind of depressed. So the thing is that we can do something about this. I mean, we can personally do something about our carbon footprint, our CO2. And, as I always exhort people to do, now is the time to put solar panels on your house and switch your heating over to geothermal heating, and, get an electric car. And the thing is that doing all those things actually benefits you. Having solar panels on your house, unless your utility has a solar panel penalty like Bowling Green does, will help your electric bill. Electric bills are going to go up in the future because it's getting harder and harder to maintain the grid because of storms like this. I mean, literally the grid has to be completely rebuilt in hundreds of places all across the
Sailed right
Midwest and
by
South.
Toledo too. That's been happening lately. Not
Yeah.
all the time though.
Yeah, we've been getting lucky, but that's the thing, is you roll the dice, the more often you roll the dice,
Yeah, sooner or later you're gonna lose.
yeah, sooner or later, snake eyes comes up. Don't get depressed about it. It's very easy to hear that this is happening and to respond to that by just sort of turtling, just sort of pulling in all your arms and legs and head and just kind of ignoring the whole problem. But take it from me, doing one action, doing anything, putting solar panels on your roof, switching to an electric car, changing to geothermal, or even lesser things, doing anything makes you feel better than doing nothing. Okay.
Yeah.
If you get solar panels on your roof, you can say you've done your part. And we see that places where culturally people have accepted this and started doing it, like Texas and California, it makes a huge difference. It really does. So.
And if there's any lesson in all this environmental chaos, it's that nature, we don't really know very much about what nature can do. Nature might be able to pull it together and save the day here.
Yeah, if once we stop putting the carbon in,
right,
I'm convinced,
given
confident,
half a chance even.
Yeah, I'm confident that all these systems will pull excess carbon out of the air faster even than it's predicted.
We don't really understand what nature can do that negatively is going to impact as a result of us negatively affecting nature.
Right.
And we don't know the other way too. Like we're still learning stuff about nature.
Right. But the big lesson is less carbon in the air. And,
yes.
And you can do your part to help.
That's an
happen.
example of a thing you can do to help.
Yes. Okay. Now, speaking of less carbon in the air, this is an interesting interview with Randi Pokladnik, because our state legislature has been, basically it's like a global warming denial legislature. They don't come right out and deny it, but their policies, encouraging more natural gas, trying to encourage coal, they're acting like global warming deniers. And the ironic thing about this is that they're also, with this law we're going to talk about with Randi, they're also trying to force people to accept carbon capture and storage, trying to accept CO2 being injected under their houses. And so, that immediately raises the question, why bother with carbon capture if global warming isn't real?
Yeah.
But what we tried to answer that question, and let's go listen to this interview now.
Hello, and welcome back to For a Green Future. Could you please share with us your name and who you're with?
My name is Randi Pokladnik, and I actually volunteer with a lot of different organizations, but right now I'm working pretty steadily with the Buckeye Environmental Network as a volunteer and an expert as far as carbon capture and sequestration is concerned in Ohio.
Okay, so just a little bit of background here. Let's talk about what exactly carbon capture and sequestration, or CCS, what that is.
It's actually a process that uses some technology to pull carbon dioxide from waste streams. So it would be like a power plant that has CO2 in the emissions, or an alcohol facility, an ethanol facility that uses corn to make ethanol for biogas. And they use the technology to extract the CO2 from that waste stream, compress it, and then pipe it through pipelines at a supercritical point, which is over 1,000 psi and 88 degrees Fahrenheit. And then the end goal is to inject it into geology that's deep below the soil level. And right now, there's really only one place that they've actually done this in Ohio, and it was a experimental well that was drilled about a half an hour from where I live in Janadenhutton in Tuscarawas County. And this was, I believe, in 2011. And it was a project between Battelle and the Department of Energy. So it's pretty new to Ohio.
Mm-hmm. And so that you pump it into the ground into what they call these pore spaces.
Yes, yeah, pore spaces, right.
And those are
just I think of the ground in certain places like a sponge, so it's not a solid strata. It's got tiny openings, and they hope that those openings will contain the CO2 for the millennia.
Mm-hmm. So basically taking CO2 out of the air and pumping it into holes in the ground.
Well, it's not taking it out of the air, it's taking it out of the waste stream. And the reason I point that out is because there is another process called direct air capture, which does remove it from the air. This process, carbon capture and sequestration, wouldn't lower the amount of parts per million right now in the atmosphere. It would only be taking it from the waste stream. So hopefully that it wouldn't increase the amount of CO2 that's in the atmosphere. Direct air capture would actually decrease the amount of CO2 because it's removing it from the atmosphere, not really from a waste stream.
I see. But largely, environmental groups sort of reject this whole technology, right? I mean, what are the reasons that a lot of groups say this is not a path we should even go down?
Well, there's several reasons. One of them is the fact that this encourages more fossil fuel burning. The companies that burn fossil fuel are using this as a way to kind of greenwash their companies, saying that they're going to help with climate change, which it really doesn't. So it encourages more fossil fuel use. It's dangerous. It's not been proven to be effective. If you look at existing carbon capture projects across the globe, no one's really been able to capture 90% of their emissions. And another big reason that a lot of companies want to do it is because they get paid per ton of CO2. So right now, the Inflation Reduction Act increased that amount. It's $85 per ton. And one of the sticking points is that the companies are their own auditors. So we have no way of really determining if company X has actually sequestered 1,000,000 tons of CO2, but they'll get paid for that 1,000,000 tons. And if you work out the math, pick a large power plant in the Ohio River Valley, for 1 year to pay them for their sequestered CO2, it would be over $1 billion. So we're talking about a lot of money that's going to be fronted by the taxpayers, in addition to the millions, probably billions of dollars that have already been spent on all these demonstration projects that the DOE has bought into.
So in effect, these polluters would be paid to generate the pollution and then paid to capture a part of it. Yeah, so that doesn't exactly discourage fossil fuel use, does it?
No, and I think another sticking point that came out when I testified at the hearings last week for HB 170 was whenever these companies retrofit, like if you have an existing power plant and you retrofit it, a coal power plant or a gas power plant, it's going to take 30% more energy just to run the carbon capture facility. So at a time in Ohio when we're screaming about we need more energy for all the AI centers, now we're going to also have more energy needed for the carbon capture and sequestration facility that's retrofitted. And also, we're worried about consumers will be footing the bill for those retrofits. And once again, we're talking about millions of dollars to retrofit a power plant or a gas plant or an ethanol plant with this facility. And then, last but not least, the water issue is also coming into play because these facilities require 2 times as much water as a normal power plant. And of course, people that, lived around power plants know that they're usually situated along a river, especially coal, and that's for the cooling process that they need for the coal power plant. So if these are retrofitted, you're going to need more water, because the facility is going to have to increase to make up for the electricity or the energy needed for that carbon capture process.
So it all sounds a little bit scammy, but it sounds like the Ohio State Legislature wants to encourage this. What exactly is this bill that you testified on, and what would it do?
Well, I think for me, one of the worst parts of the bill is the fact that they can take property using eminent domain from landowners, private landowners, to sequester CO2. So it's real similar to what they do with, forced pulling in oil and gas. We have been forced pulled, my husband and I, and what happens in that situation is if the owners of 70% of the land that they want to frack is signed off on leases, then the other 30% the landowners of that piece, they are forced to sign a lease and frack. The same situation would be true with carbon capture. If they can get the owners of 70% of this acreage of pore space, then the other 30% get pulled into that, regardless of whether they want, this is fisky. And I mean, it's being downplayed as far as toxicity, but make no mistake, this is toxic. 10% can kill you in the atmosphere, and it's an asphyxiant. So you're going to have to deal with living in a house that's going to have that buried underneath. And there's so many issues, like, will this drift? Will the plume drift underneath of your property onto somebody else's property and kill them? Or will the CO2 drift onto a person who doesn't have a lease signed with the company? There's a lot of legal issues they don't address. They don't address mandatory seismic testing. And after 50 years, the state assumes liability for carbon capture from these companies. And 50 years doesn't seem like, a short period of time, but that means the next generation will have to deal with this. And if even as much as, or as little as 1% of CO2 leaks from these facilities, it really makes the process null and void as far as the climate change fixer.
And you mentioned the idea that the CO2 could get out and poison people. This isn't theoretical, right? That has actually happened in several places.
Yes, it has. I mean, there was a facility, Archer Daniels Midland, which has been doing carbon capture for a really long time in Illinois. And this was an ethanol plant. They had, a release, and they're worried about another issue. Environmentalists are also worried about is contamination of the groundwater, because carbon dioxide, when it reacts with water, it forms carbonic acid, which is acidic, and that renders the drinking water or the aquifer itself, useless. And then you have to worry about breaks in the pipeline. And this is what happened down in Mississippi in Satartia, where they had a fractured pipeline. And you had to remember, when these pipelines break, that gas has been pressurized to 1,000 psi. So in a few minutes, that can fog the entire area. And people are trying to act like, because I've heard, the greenwashing terms, well, plants need carbon dioxide, it's a good thing. Well, not when it's 10% of the atmosphere that you're trying to breathe in. And these people experienced this, and 45 of them went to the hospital. 250 plus were evacuated. And even after this has happened, and it's been quite a few years, I believe it was in 2020, they're still experiencing effects from this, because when it reacts with water, and your blood has water in it, and your body has water in it, it also creates carbonic acid. So you're experiencing what medical people call acidosis in your bloodstream if you're exposed to high concentrations of this.
Mm-hmm. So people could be forced to have it pumped under their own houses against their will. Kind of says that the whole property rights idea that used to be a conservative value has kind of gone out the window in order to encourage this. Another thing that kind of strikes me about this bill is that it limits the liabilities of the corporations that are doing it, so that if there are accidents, what kind of recourse do people have?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question that a lot of people have asked. And a lot of people were also pointing to the fact that the very area that they want to sequester this, it's kind of a double-edged sword. They're fracking this area, and they're pulverizing the bedrock to release the methane gas, and yet they expect that when they shoot the CO2 down, that gas is going to stay underground. So it's what is really true here? Are we going to successfully be able to sequester CO2 in areas that are heavily fracked? Then you add in the orphan wells, 36,000 orphan wells in the state of Ohio, and the majority of which have not been capped. There is another place where CO2 can burp up through the rock strata. Then you've got class 2 injection wells. There's another place where it can burp up through the rock strata, and then existing wells that are used for fracking right now. And there's so many. It's somebody compared it to Swiss cheese. We're trying to store CO2 under rock strata that basically looks like Swiss cheese, with all these holes drilled in here. And then where I live in Harrison County, there's also been underground mining for decades, and that adds just another piece to that puzzle of, is it going to stay down there or not?
And the ironic thing, of course, is that this legislation is being pushed by a lot of legislatures who actually deny global warming in the first place, right? So this is
Yeah, it's
go
hard
ahead.
to believe. I know. Yeah. Why are we worried about capturing it and storing it if it's not causing climate change? Yeah, you got to pick a point. You can't be on both sides of that coin. You either believe it or you don't.
Hmm. So maybe that's something that we could point out that the legislators pushing for this actually must actually believe in climate change. So
Right, right, yeah.
okay, well, just two more questions. First of all, is there anything you'd like to add about this? Oh, and what are the bill numbers?
Oh, the House bill is HB 170. The Senate bill is 136. I think what scares me is that virtually no one in the state knows what's going on. I mean, unless you're involved in the environmental movement or listen to, alternative radio or web blogs, you're not going to really understand what's going on. And the saddest thing is the legislatures don't understand what's going on. I mean, we have testified and we have written documents and sent peer-reviewed studies to the people that are on the committees, and just questioning them, at town meetings, a few of them that have come to town meetings, they do not understand the process. I mean, Monica Robb Blaisdell, who introduced HB 170, sat at the testimony last week and didn't say a single word. And this is the testimony, this is the document that she introduced, the legislation that she introduced, and she had ample opportunity to question several expert witnesses that were there at the State House that made the trip 2 hours, yet she didn't question them. And some of the questions were, kind of ridiculous. I had one representative ask me if I thought CO2 was a pollutant. I mean, if you have to ask that question at this stage of the game and you really don't know that it is or it isn't, and these are the people that are making the decisions on this bill, and they're going to put our lives in jeopardy. And the issue that they haven't even talked about is that right now there are no carbon capture facilities in the state of Ohio. It would take at least 2 years, maybe 3, to retrofit some of these facilities. So why the rush to get this legislation pushed through? And we don't understand that. We don't understand why they're ignoring the fact that if they want to use carbon capture on the ethanol plants on the western side of the state, why are they not talking about the pipelines that they're going to need to pull that CO2 from the western side over to the eastern side? The carbon capture wells that Tenaska, the company that is actually right now in our area trying to lease out land for these injection wells, they said primarily Jefferson County, Carroll County, and Harrison County. And then there's a couple counties in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. So this is supposed to be where it's being sequestered. There definitely will need to be pipelines. And if you just Google Summit Pipeline out in the Midwest, I mean, those people in Illinois, Indiana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, they're all pushing back against eminent domain for pipeline land that they're wanting to, bury this underneath farms and homes in those states. So this is just a tip of the iceberg, fighting this whole carbon capture boondoggle.
That was our interview with Randi Pokladnik. What do you think? Give us a call at 877-909-1007. What would you think about having CO2 pumped under your house at 1,000 pounds per square inch? Would you like that to happen, whether you wanted it or not? Or, because actually this region has what they call, the spaces that you could pump CO2 into, because we used to have a bunch of natural gas wells around here. That's kind of what built Bowling Green, actually, was
That's
gas.
why they got like the couple of 3-4 real fancy houses down by the courthouse with Victorian carvings, and there's a painted lady.
That was
infamous
during
painted lady.
the Bowling Green oil boom.
It was short, but it had an impact.
Yeah, and so the idea that you can pump CO2 back into the ground, could be happening right here in Northwest Ohio too. Okay, well, on to the next part of our show, which I always enjoy, and that is thanking our advertisers and patrons. Imagine a place where nature meets adventure, where you can climb, paddle, fish, and explore. That place, it's right here in Wood County. The Wood County Park District is here to protect, preserve, and inspire. We conserve natural and cultural treasures so you can enjoy the outdoors like never before by maintaining green spaces, providing fun programs, restoring wildlife habitats, and leading outdoor adventures. Want to connect with nature? Try your hand at archery, bouldering, geocaching, paddling, rappelling, and more. Whether you're seeking experience or a peaceful retreat, our parks are open every day from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset all year round. Come explore, get outside, experience nature. Your parks, your adventures waiting for you. Find us online at wcparks.org or follow on Instagram, Facebook, or X, or call 419-353-1897. The Wood County Park District, preserving nature, creating adventure, and inspiring a greener future. And For a Green Future is also brought to you by our patrons. And our patrons are wonderful people who've gone to patreon.com. That's Patreon. There they searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page, and they scrolled through, searching for a membership level that matched their budgets. And every month now, a little bit comes out of their accounts, comes over to us. And literally, that's how we could afford to keep bringing you this wonderful show. And part of what we do with our show is we let Rebecca have a turn at the mic every week. What are we talking about this week, Rebecca?
All right. Well, we're continuing with our Stuff in Becca's Front Yard series.
Okay.
Which I should just clarify. My front yard is tiny. My entire yard is tiny. A guy does it, the whole thing, for $25.
Okay. Yep, that's small.
It's not a big yard, but it has a lot of things in it, more things than you would suspect. So yeah, this week we got a little notice from the city, accompanied by some sort of ornaments and questionable taste on our tree lawn, suggesting that we are going to get red oak saplings.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Planted on our tree lawns.
Okay.
So yeah, I thought I'd find out a little bit about our new member of our yard community. So yeah, Quercus ruba is red oak. It's native to North America. It features fast growth, good fall color, and strong wood. And also a lot of acorns for wildlife, very popular. We already, like, all night I hear squirrels playing in my window because we have a walnut tree too, and walnuts hitting things, hitting the window, hitting the house.
Uh-huh.
So the squirrels are in for a windfall in a couple of years. So yeah, you can tell an oak because they have long lobed leaves, which look sort of like aliens designed them, in my opinion. Not saying anything, but, right. So the tips of the leaves tend to turn red or bronze in the fall, which is nice for people. Also, they have gray-ridged bark, and their flowers are catkins, a catkin being a long, slim cluster of tiny flowers, which are wind-pollinated and can be either male or female. So they just sort of, the wind mixes it all up, and the flowers don't have to do much. So some of the benefits of red oaks are that they do carbon sequestration via absorbing CO2 through photosynthesis, which is a good way to do that.
Yeah.
As we've said a few times. They also provide soil stabilization, and their roots improve water infiltration also. So less likely to have droughts and floods and all kinds of crazy stuff. They provide food and habitat for birds, mammals, and insects, and they are climate regulators. So yeah, they have a lot of good benefits. Some problems with them is that they are susceptible to oak wilt and other pests and diseases. There's an implication that they're more susceptible than some other trees. I don't know. I guess they're not really especially hardy trees. So we'll have to keep an eye on it and see what kind of critters are around it. Yeah, they can have a negative impact on soil mite communities, which soil mites are microarthropods, which an arthropod, I probably covered this before, but I mostly forgot, are invertebrates with jointed appendages, segmented bodies, and hard exoskeletons. So Think insects, lobsters, that kind of thing. Their exoskeletons are made of chitin, Chitin. And the soil mites help decompose organic plant, decompose or organic and plant matter. So that's a good thing. You don't want things just sitting around rotting indefinitely. That's how you get your dog having to be dragged away from the same patch of Thanksgiving leftovers that somebody spilled on the lawn at Thanksgiving.
Aha.
Now it's decomposed to the point where she just wants to roll in that patch of lawn instead of trying to eat it. So that's good. But it helped her catch her that one time when she got away because she had to stop and visit her favorite lawn patch. So, yeah, problem with that, though, the problem with the oaks and the soil mites is that they can favor specific species and thereby reduce diversity of the soil mite community, which is apparently important. So that's not good. And get ready for the smoothest transition ever. Speaking of things that are red.
Okay, red oaks and
Red crested lemurs.
Huh.
No, we're not getting those in our front yard. I'm pretty sure. But yeah, lemurs. We went to see to have one of the behind the scenes zoo experiences.
oh, that's nice.
And they look expensive, but if you split them between 4 people, sometimes they're not so bad.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so for roughly $50 a pop, we all got to go back and go right up to the lemur cage and get some really good pictures of red crested lemurs, which are the prettiest lemurs that the zoo has, in my opinion. And the lemurs literally saw us coming. We stepped in the. They're the friendliest species we've done this experience with so far. They were friendly. They were animated. They probably did not really love us for our minds, but that was okay. So we got to go back and we got to feed them apple chunks at the end of skewers. And I found out that lemurs are matriarchal, at least this species is, because the daddy lemur was sort of skulking off to the side, looking downcast and not very interested. And everybody else was climbing around on the fence. So I gave everybody, a few apple chunks and then went over and gave him the rest of mine while everybody else fed the mama and baby lemurs.
I'm sure he appreciated that.
He is a new man once you get a few apple chunks in him, that fella. Yeah, he got all excited and was climbing on the fence like everybody else. And yeah, so it was a fabulous time. I really liked it. Everybody really liked it.
Okay, so the way to a lemur's heart is apple chunks.
Definitely.
Remember that.
And also for those who are people who can't help being strongly tempted to pet various animals that will bite you. Bite and scratch. They apparently we asked, and they are not really bunny soft in terms of that fluffy fur, but they're softer than red pandas.
Okay.
They're in the middle, so a good conditioner could get them over the edge.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thanks,
Yeah.
Rebecca, for that report. And so now it's time to head off to ecological news. And unfortunately, bad news story to start with. This is a story in Mother Jones back on May 6th. Title is Bird Populations Are Declining Across North America. And unfortunately, there's 500 species and roughly that they studied, and 3/4 of those species are in decline, and 2/3 of them are in what you'd call rapid decline, severely. The numbers are dropping very severely. This was an actual study was published in the journal Science, and the biggest drops, unfortunately, are the most remote areas out there in the Arctic and in the middle of grasslands and the dry lands. A study done by Cornell University, and they offer an app called eBird, and people use this to find out what kind of bird they're looking at, basically. And to sort of report when they see a cool bird and a as birders they're trying to always get that next bird off their list, check it off. Yep. And so what they did is they were able to take the data from the eBird app, because every time somebody reports a bird, it gets recorded. And so now they have this tremendous database that they gathered over about 10 years. And they found that some of the places are losing their birds at a rate of about 10% per year.
Not
of the
cool.
Population, right? Um,
That's not at all groovy.
right. The study didn't try to define why this is happening. One of the theories is global warming, because heat does affect reproduction. It's very direct, because those poor little male sperm actually don't like it hot.
Yeah.
But there are little pockets where the populations of these birds are actually still going up, but the little pockets, like the little forest here and there where populations are increasing, don't make up for the huge areas where they're decreasing. So some bad news there. More bad news. Off to Montana. We've reported on this before, how the Montana legislature is just wolf phobic. They just hate wolves. And they just passed a law. It's HB 554. And essentially, it was signed into law on May 5th. And essentially what it says is that the wolf kills are no longer regulated.
Good.
Yeah. So the state wildlife department no longer defines wolves as either a fur-bearing or a game animal. Now they're just an animal, and so they don't. So
I'm pretty sure that most wolves have fur.
yeah, and people use that fur.
You don't see a lot of pictures of naked wolves.
No, I've never seen a bald wolf. So, so the state legislature, the effect of doing that means that now their state wildlife division no longer regulates the hunting.
If you see a completely, maybe it might be a little patchy, but if you see a completely bald one, that might be a chupacabras.
Yeah. So the thing is that, of course, there's no biological reasoning behind any of these anti-wolf laws. They just have said that they want to. Their goal is to cut the wolf population in Montana in half. And the thing is also that there's a website called Women for Wolves, and they've done surveys, and literally less than 1% of Montanans want this policy. The people who live in Montana live there because it's such a wild, wonderful place. And, 99% of the people who live there know that if you eliminate the top predator, if you eliminate the wolves, that destabilizes the entire ecosystem, and they don't want that to happen. But these insane legislators are pushing these things through. Now, they did vote down. There was a proposal to have the wolf hunt go year-round with no regulation, and they did vote that down. So it's like 3 steps back, half a step not forward, but just not a fourth step back.
Right.
But they still have the stated goal of eliminating half the wolf population. Oh, and the reason that they said they didn't want to do the year-round hunting is because that would interfere with the tourism, which is one of the biggest sources of revenue in Montana, as people go to Montana to see wolves.
I just read this week that coyotes I saw it on a video. I just learned this week that coyotes have a thing where if females yip and they don't get enough yips back, that makes their bodies have more cubs somehow.
Yeah. The coyotes will try to fill the gap if wolves are missing, and of course in a healthy ecosystem, wolves eat coyotes, and so you have
but
don't need as many of them, but
kill off all the wolves, and then you got coyotes,
right, which are actually more of a nuisance, quote unquote, nuisance species. But
right,
all right, next.
Well, they think we're a nuisance too, so back at you.
Yeah, it's hard to argue.
We are legitimately a nuisance.
We're a nuisance
to them and a lot of other things.
Yeah. Okay, next story. This is in Reuters on May 12th. U.S. will fast-track Utah uranium mine permit. And the Interior Department has announced that there's a mine called the Velvet Wood uranium mine owned by Anfield Energy. And they are going to do the entire environmental review in 2 weeks, 14 days, which is actually literally impossible. You can't even do a groundwater modeling in 2 weeks. It takes, it takes months and sometimes years to gather the data, and then figure out where that's going to do. And of course, one of the biggest problems of uranium mining is that it pollutes groundwater and makes wells unusable, and you can't irrigate with water that's been contaminated with uranium. And it's horrible. And so essentially, this is the Trump administration, the Interior Department under Burgum, announcing that we're no longer going to do environmental reviews because you can't possibly do it in 14 days. And the Reuters story had the major flaw that they did not ask any environmental groups about it. Literally, it was just the Interior Department's statement and the statement of the mining company, both saying, "Isn't this wonderful?" So I did go searching, and I found a story in the Salt Lake Tribune on May 16th, and their story about this was titled "Energy Emergency Bogus NEPA Review." That was a quote from the Center for Western Priorities that said that this beggars belief, the idea that they can supposedly do an environmental review in just 14 days. And both the Center for Biological Diversity also weighed in this article, and they said that the whole reason for this, the whole justification legally, is that there's supposedly an energy emergency. And, Trump declared that energy emergency on his first day in office. And so that's what they're using to justify not following environmental laws. But of course, even though there's an energy emergency, they've also banned wind development, and they're trying to stop solar development. The two fastest growing energy sources in the world, which could answer an energy emergency. So they're sure not acting like there's an energy emergency. They're thinking that this mine will be operational by 2027. They estimate 5 million pounds of uranium ore there, which is, if we mine that, we're screwed. So let's hope they fail. Okay, next story, and this is from a Finlandian website called yle.fi, which I'm sure that means something in Finnish, but I don't know what it means. Title, TVO, leak of radioactive material at OL3 nuclear plant. So, Olkiluoto nuclear plant, one of the newest nuclear plants in the world, spilled 100 cubic meters of highly radioactive coolant water into these basement rooms that are designed to catch spills. And so they say they managed to contain it all. And they also said it was a result of human error, as if, one thing nukesters like to do is say, oh, well, that was human error. That doesn't count because it was a human mistake.
If your safety precautions depend on human perfection, that's not a good plan, generally speaking.
Yeah.
I've noticed this about humans.
Yes, that we do make errors.
At some point, we mess up.
Yeah, it's very true. So anyway, the nuclear plant there has been shut down since March 1st. They have, for their annual outage, when they did their annual outage in 2024, they had to add 5 extra weeks to it, which caused shortages of electricity and massive increases in electric rates. And just so a related story, our friends over in Ontario who are fighting the nuclear plants there, they just did a survey, and 80% of Ontarians think they should not be building the 4 nuclear plants that Doug Ford wants to build. They should cancel the GE Hitachi contract, and instead 70% said they should do wind and solar instead. So smart people up there in Ontario. Too bad their leaders aren't quite that bright. Next story, Progress Playbook, May 15th. This is a good news story, okay? China's emissions decline amid clean energy surge. So for the first time, China's CO2 emissions have actually dropped. So it does look like they've passed the peak, and now they're going to be starting to decline their emissions, which they are the largest polluters in the world by far. And this isn't a huge drop. It's 1.6% first quarter of 2025 versus the first quarter of 2024. And for the past 12 months, it's a drop of 1%. And the reason is wind and solar. they've installed so much wind and solar that they're actually cutting the output of their coal plants, even though they're still building new coal plants for some reason. And the good thing about this is that the emissions declined even though the demand increased. So they're building wind and solar at a rate that more than equals the increase in demand. And so China runs things with their dictatorship. They run everything with 5-year plans. And so a lot of people are waiting for their next 5-year plan. And they think that maybe they're going to get to net zero even faster than they predicted. So the power, the CO2 dropped 5.8% just for the power sector. So that CO2 emission was for all sectors, transportation, construction, everything. In just the electricity sector, it actually dropped 5.8%, even though demand went up 2.5%. And the demand for all the other sectors went up 3.5%. So despite that, because they've switched over to electric and they've done so much wind and solar, they managed to finally drop their emissions. So that's worth celebrating.
Yes, it is.
Now here's a local Ohio story. Well, not too local. It's Youngstown, New York. Story on May 15th, WFMJ Youngstown. Title is Fracking Halted at Ohio Site Linked to Recent Earthquakes.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. So in Ohio, we have this plan, or this policy is first cause earthquakes, then we'll regulate your fracking pad.
All righty.
And so there's a pad in Noble County, a well pad there, owned by the Energy Acquisition Partners. And the ODNR actually finally said, okay, stop. Because the Ohio Seismic Network found that on May 8th it had caused a 3.2 on the Richter scale earthquake. On May 6th it caused a 2.3 earthquake. May 2nd a 2.4, and April 29th was the first one, 2.8 on the Richter scale. Now this this halt is right now. They're saying it's temporary. I don't know why you would temporarily stop earthquakes. It seems to me you'd kind of want to permanently stop earthquakes, but
sometimes you just need a little break from earthquakes.
Just take a rest.
Yeah.
That's enough earthquakes for a month or so.
Right.
We'll take some more later on. But if you notice from that pattern, the severity of the earthquakes are increasing, which might be part of their decision. They might have been part of, like, after the first couple, they might have been 2.3, 2.4, what the heck. But then they got hit with the 3.2, and like, oh, we better do something about this. So 5 earthquakes later, kudos to the Ohio Department of Natural Resources for finally saying, just stop. Okay, the last story, and unfortunately, this is a really bad story, and it touches on, I missed you last week, Rebecca, because I weren't able to talk about the idea that effects of global warming cause more global warming, which is
positive feedback loop.
Positive feedback loop,
Yeah.
yes. Story. This is an unpublished story or an unpublished study. But the results were important enough that they released their study before it got accepted to a journal. So title is Large Cloud Feedback Confirms High Climate Sensitivity. And essentially what the researchers found was that over the past 25 years, the Earth's albedo, that is the amount of sunlight that the planet reflects back out into space, has been steadily declining. And what they attribute this to is cloud feedback. And that means that clouds reflect sunlight back out into space. And so they're saying that because it's hotter, there's fewer large clouds forming. And because there's fewer clouds forming to reflect the sunlight back out into space, the Earth is absorbing more sunlight.
That seems bad.
Right. And so there's your feedback loop that fewer clouds means more heat, which means fewer clouds. And this is what these researchers are saying is one of the reasons that the rate that global warming is happening is so much faster than all the models are predicting, because they're not taking into account this positive feedback loop. Now, it is important to note this study has not been peer reviewed yet, but it is also important to remember that it's quite likely that the predictions based on our current models are underestimating the rate of, and that is true. I mean, that's been proving. Our current models are underestimating that the rate that the Earth is heating up. And this idea of positive feedback loop, that the effects of global warming increase the rate of global warming, that probably is the explanation. Now, whether or not this large cloud feedback is going to turn out to be exactly right or not, that's a separate question. But I think it's important to know that this could be right. It is entirely possible that more heat means fewer clouds, and fewer clouds means more heat. And one thing I noticed when I was on my journey this past week to Western New York and back is that the number of electric cars are definitely increasing. I'm definitely seeing more of them, but still the vast majority of us are going to the pump, putting that gasoline in, and we really need to stop doing that, because that's the biggest cause of global warming on the planet right now. All right, well, that's it. We made it through yet another show. Thanks for sticking with us. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
Bye-bye.
I don't want no oil spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!